So I've heard you say that the day you found out that you were a New York Times bestseller, you were depressed all day. Is that true?
That is true. There's a combination of reasons. I had finished the book, sent in a copy, thinking that they were going to edit it, and then they just put it out. And so I felt like it wasn't ready. So there was a huge part of me that wanted to go in and make changes, but they were like, "Don't worry about it. It's so good. We love it." And I still felt in my heart there was more to it. But I also have lived enough of my life to know that getting what you want doesn't always fulfill you, because the reason that we want certain things is to fix a void, usually. So when I finally have that person, then I will no longer be lonely. When I finally get New York Times bestseller, then I'm no longer irrelevant, all these things. And to me, there's just such a higher fulfillment in actually healing those wounds than
Mm,
just getting what you want over and over and distracting you from these things that are in your body that aren't true. So
mm,
yeah, I mean, that was like 2016. But when I found out I was a New York Times bestseller, I just felt we don't have the foundation of the book the way I want it. I felt, this is a big deal that I've been chasing forever. And then to get it was like not necessarily that big of a thing. And, this thing that you think you'll get when you finally get the thing didn't hit nearly as well. And I've been very lucky to get a lot of the things that I've always wanted in order to teach me that it's not the answer to life. So
mm.
I'm so much more fulfilled by letting go and healing the wounds. And then I notice a byproduct is a lot of amazing things come into my life, but they're not things that I'm necessarily chasing or think will fulfill something that's empty. And so not getting was a great, or getting it and not feeling fulfilled was a great lesson for me, because you just start to go, man, it's just in the now that you're going to really feel fulfilled.
Mm. So what do you after that? Because I'm assuming before that moment, that was something that you majorly valued was getting that New York Times bestseller, becoming a famous author, or so like what fulfills you now? What are the things that makes you whole now that aren't material success?
Yeah, well, one of the things I love to do is look internally at what lies still exist in my body.
Mm,
So I believe a lot of us have created a doing mentality that I got to do something, I got to do this. If I am loved for what I do. If I accomplish this, if I make enough money, then I will be finally happy. But I've found in doing this work that in an old dimension that we've grown up in and where we are from the past, a lot of times we think if I do this, then I will no longer be, and there's a negative, then I'll no longer be a failure. I'll no
mm,
longer be unworthy. So I believe that all of us have like a trauma that's a lie that's sitting in our body that we're not looking at. And then on top of it is a character that has some defense mechanism, achiever, protector, codependency, whatever. And it keeps your focus on outside. If only you get that goal, then you'll finally be something. But under that is a wounded child that showed up from traumas. And I think the way that it works is when you were 5, when you were 6 years old, all of us had wounds, moments that were really scary, whether it was a parent yelling at you or spanking you or walking out, and the kid feels trauma and the kid goes, I don't ever want to feel this again. So if you get yelled at because you got an F in school, or spanked for it or something, you might create like a character that you think is you, but goes, I'm here to achieve, 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 achieve. And now you think that's your identity. And so you have the next goal and the next thing, and then I'm finally the best, and then I'll finally be something, and I'll never be abandoned again by my mom or yelled at by my dad again. So for me, the most exciting thing, especially in this time that we're in, is to go inward and let go. And I believe very much that the time we're in is not nearly as much about achieving as it is about letting go. And I think a reason that society is full of people going crazy is because patterns that are false, that people think they are trying to die. And it's almost like the universe or God is trying to pull out of you everything you're not. So the one that could be abandoned, the one that's unlovable, all these things is trying to fall out. So what I like to do when I wake up is meditate, listen deeply, go inside and feel the wounds inside that aren't true, and they usually leave via tears in my body. And so when they do, I notice there's a much lighter frequency to me. There's something that's higher. And when those wounds go away, they're always replaced by kind of synchronicities, magic, more possibilities, joy. And I learned that instead of the ego me trying to achieve something so that I can inevitably be something to my mom when I was 7, is
Hmm.
dying to make room for a higher frequency me so that the universe can just create next steps and work through me. This to me is so much more fulfilling, and get out of the way egoically to make room for something more magical that wants to come through and create. And I find that in this time, we are losing our egoic force and our egoic have to make it happen. Many, many, many of my clients are people that say, I have worked so hard. I'm working 50, 60 hours a week and I'm still not making money. And I'll say that's because you're moving from an egoic frequency of more is better and of force. And you're not moving up in vibration as much as you're staying on a linear timeline and trying to force work, when the truth is that you is doing that out of a deep-rooted fear that you're not enough. And if you instead heal that wound, you go up in vibration. Then really high level ideas come through, a ton of abundance comes through, worthiness, all these things start to just come through. And it's like instead of you being on the first floor of a building trying to be the best on that floor, you're the elevator that has new floors and new dimensions and new
Hmm.
possibilities. And that to me is kind of what a timeline is about. I don't know if you've heard spiritual speakers talk about timelines, but I kind of see a timeline as like a floor of a building. And in the old days, we just thought we were one floor. And so you're looking in the future, which is like the other end of this first floor. And in this time, like since 2012 and then 2020, people are bringing a new dimension in and going up the elevator. So that's why you'll have a day where you think you know what your future is. And then the next day you have a whole new idea and you let go of this plan that you had yesterday. The elevator's moving up faster. So you're looking down other floors and you're like, oh, that's the end. No, it's not. Never mind. And so a lot of times people are declaring new plans. That's like the end of a floor. And then their elevator goes up and it has a new idea and a new idea. So our job is now to undo our addiction to the past and future and let the elevator just pull you up and remove the old floors from your body and create space from higher dimensions.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the thing that's tough about the achievement, like the people that are chasing achievement, is that something I've noticed is that you get that high, right? There's like that honeymoon stage of like you're like thrilled that you got it, but then that
Yeah.
high kind of wears off a little bit. And then you
Yeah.
gotta go back to baseline. And then it's almost like a drug where like if you don't reach that high again, you feel like
Yeah.
you're a failure, even if you are exponentially going up, right?
Yeah. And that's because I believe a way to see it is like life or the universe or God or whatever is trying to show you that thing was more your God than what you
Mm,
are. Right? So sometimes when we're at a lower consciousness, we can achieve a bunch of things because we haven't brought enough life and light in to say, is this the answer to everything? So there is a stage where we do get to achieve things and enjoy things and kind of keep getting it. But the more you go inward, the more you meditate, the more you let go of certain things that feel heavy, the more you go up in vibration, the more you say yes to a calling, it kind of makes this dimensional shift that starts to bring in questions that says, is that really the answer to my life? When I finally get 1 million followers, or when I finally have a New York Times bestseller, or am a #1 speaker, is that the end of the fulfillment? And to me, I almost see us as like caterpillars moving into butterflies, and just chasing from a struggle energy achievement is like becoming the best of the caterpillars. But when you go into a cocoon, the caterpillar energy that is the egoic you starts to die. And if you think you're the achiever, the cocoon feels like death. But if you get that there's a magical you on the other side that can do more than the most that your forceful you can do, then the cocoon is birth. And many of our cocoons are a major fall apart of our old ways. You know, one of the things that's shown up since 2020 is people losing a lot of things: businesses, ability to travel, connection to certain family members, arguments over political stuff, people losing connections to their parents, family members, different things. These are all falling out for a lot of people. And when that does, patterns of trauma can finally come to light because you're no longer the story of your small self that has all these attachments. So when these things fall apart, you will suddenly lose the part of you that was attached to those things. And
Mm,
then all of a sudden, maybe the trauma that was under that, the I'm not lovable enough, I'm not enough, that falls out too. And then is replaced with a lot of magic and a lot of joy. So the cocoon for all of us is a lot of times a collapse and a fall apart of the way things were working for us before to make room for us to move from what I do to what I am. I'd rather be loved for what I am than what I do. And in the old paradigm, we were loved for what we do. You know, your parents saying, go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, you got to get straight A's. So I'll be proud of you based on what you do. But that's such an F you to God to say you're loved for what you do versus you're just loved and in purpose just because you exist. And so for me, there's been a total freedom in discovering that I'm lovable even if I've made mistakes. I'm lovable even if I don't achieve. I'm lovable. And these old paradigms that say I'm not worthy are based on a false idea that you're loved based on what you do. But the truth is, you're just love. And these old things that feel like they made us succeed in the past need to collapse to make room for the real truth of what you are, which is capable of more with no effort. So the
mm,
truth of what you are can do so much more miraculously based on vibration than if you stay in a lower, keep your trauma in forced energy. So that's what if you've heard people talk about the shift from 3D to 5D, that's a higher dimension where you're undoing the traumas and connecting to yourself as God or the universe's child versus your parents' patterns child.
mm. Yeah, another big factor in this too, and this is something that, to be honest, I'm still struggling with, is that guilt too, right? It's
Mhm.
like if you're not doing something productive, or if you're not doing something that pushes the needle forward, you feel like anxiety and guilt about that. How do we overcome that feeling? And
Yeah.
what's your just touch on guilt and shame and all of this as well?
Yeah. So guilt, there's, I can actually, if you want, I can work with you on this right here.
Sure. Yeah.
But guilt's purpose, first of all, to the ego, the guilt comes up and says, if you do that, you're going to feel guilty. So here would be a
Mhm.
great example. Let's say someone's in a loving relationship, but it's not filling their soul, right? Let's say they're like, I don't feel expanded. I don't feel free. I know this person means well, but letting go of them will make me feel guilt, right? Okay, so if you let go of something and you start to feel guilt, the guilt is not coming up for you to cater to. In other words, it's not coming up so you feel guilty and then keep the
Mm,
relationship going. It's coming up to come out. So if you make a decision and then guilt starts to come up, it's coming up because you now have overridden the guilt and chosen something from your true highest excitement that expands you. So the guilt was the thing that actually was keeping you in the small self. So if you could make a decision that expands your soul and you feel guilt on the way, you can become the space of love for the guilt by still moving forward with your plan, crying out the guilt, and the guilt will start to point out this isn't even about this current thing. This is
mm,
about a pattern from before this current thing, right? So when you're letting go of something, you might think it's about letting go of them or letting go of that job, but you're also letting go of like the shame of a parent that says you have to keep that job or they liked that partner for you or you need to do what your mom wants, right? So it's always trying to show you something that's under the specific thing that's happening now. So the secret to the whole thing is if guilt comes up, become present and loving for it because then you move into a frequency that has a capacity to bring compassion to the guilt. And you move from being the one that feels guilt to the compassion of the guilt. So then the guilt knows that it's loved even if you choose this thing, or even if it feels guilty. And love is what transcends it.
mm,
So what people make as a mistake is they feel guilt and then act like that guilt is their God. So they need to cater to the guilt and trap it back in, and this guilt will always re-come up. You know, it'd be like you're about to throw up, but you just keep repressing it down, and it's like it's gonna throw up. But like if you're like, well, it makes me nauseous to move forward, so I don't want to. It's like, well, maybe you just need to puke for a minute and
Hmm.
release the old energies that were keeping you locked into the lower dimension in the first place. So guilt is not even a place we want to live from. So if you move into your true highest and you're not consciously hurting someone, it's not putting someone down or throwing up or hitting them or whatever. I use throwing up too much there. But if you're moving to that higher frequency and you have people or things that you're feeling guilty for, your job is to let it purge what no longer serves you, because you're not only letting go of this, but you're letting go of the guilt that held that. So you moving up in frequency is the best gift you can give yourself in the world. Then you also create a place where it's normal to let go of the things that no longer align you and make room for source to come through and work with you directly.
Hmm. You have a quote where you say, if you want something really bad, you're not ready for it. And I
Mhm.
feel like this is really important because there's this misconception of like, and I used to have this, is like just because you want something really bad means you deserve it. And I feel like as you get older, you kind of realize that like life isn't really doesn't really go that way. So what does that quote mean? If you want something really bad, you're not ready for it.
Well, very often when people desperately need something, I'm not talking about inner stuff. Like if you want inner expansion, you are ready for that. But if you're like,
Mm,
I really need a person to date, or I really have to get this job, what you're unconsciously saying is usually, if I don't, something bad happens from inside. If I don't get that person, then I'm alone. So these are the deepest, darkest fears that are in our body, right? If I don't get that job, then I'm not enough to my dad. If I don't get that, right? Do you get that? So often the desperation for something comes from a pattern that was created in order to prevent trauma. And so we don't realize that we live our lives in this default setting of never be a failure again, never be alone again, never be wrong. For some people, wrong is bad, or they link wrong to punishment or hell for some people, right? So if you understand that that's in there, then you'll understand that the one that wants it, is actually scared of what's inside of you.
mm,
And it's not even scared of what's outside. It's scared to re-feel a moment from childhood in almost every example. I've just done so many one-on-ones with people where I hear them say, I really have to have that thing, or I need that person to understand me. I got to get my mom to understand me. I have to make the money, right? And I'm not saying we don't need certain things, but I often have them fill in a sentence. If I don't get my mom to understand me, then I am blank. And they'll usually say unlovable, unworthy, unwanted. And when they say that, what I have them say is they become the now and say to the pattern, you're allowed to feel unwanted in my body. You're allowed to feel unloved in my body. What are you becoming? The unconditional love that the pattern has never heard. See, if you have a fear of failing, the child version of you might have thought, my dad says he will punish me or will not be proud of me if I fail. So the egoic construct believes if I fail, I'm not loved. But when you start to go inward and meditate and stuff like that, you start to realize you are the love for the thing that feels it's not loved. So, what I like to tell the pattern is you're allowed to fail in my body. You're allowed to have nobody like you in your body. You're allowed to be not enough. You're allowed to feel unseen, invisible. You're allowed to. And people start to say that to the pattern, and the pattern for the first time realizes it's loved, even if it doesn't go the way it wants. And then they move into tears, and the tears are the pattern finally being seen. And actually, even though there's more, permanently leaving the body. So there's trauma in our body that's trying to come out. And that's why we're all going crazy in this time, because many people think they are the pattern and they are the trauma. But all that's trying to happen is this is trying to come to light. And if you understand what's going on, this is going to be the most exciting time ever, because you're about to birth into the true version of yourself. And even though it's not familiar, that doesn't mean it's not you. See, most of us think familiar equals me. People think I want my life to be like it was. No, you don't. It's a new time. You're on a higher frequency. That's like becoming a sixth grader and thinking, I wish life was like second grade. No, no, no. You're a sixth grader and you're here to learn new things and go to seventh grade. So this is an exciting time if you understand what's going on, because we're all going to be forced into a shift one way or another. And if you don't know what's going on, you're going to be dragged into it and grabbing all your addictions and all your old story. But if you get what's going on, you can participate with the universe and go up with it.
Hmm. And something that tends to happen too is those times where you might not care as much or you're not as attached to the outcome, it tends to
Mhm.
go your way
Yes.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Attachment to the outcome at one consciousness can be really great. So if you're
Mm,
not fully awakened and aware, doing the motivation, knowing your outcome can be really good. But if you're watching an interview like this and it's hitting something in your heart, you might be too aware to be addicted to an outcome because in that field, you're saying that outcome is my God. And one of the things that's really exciting for me is to follow what I can feel expands me in the moment with no idea what the outcome's going to be, which usually puts me at a frequency for a better outcome to show up than I could have come up with in the first place. So,
mm,
there's a speaker I love named Bashar that talks about this a lot, but it's true that when you let go of attachment to an outcome, because still any outcome I can see before the journey means that I won't expand to get it. In other words, if I can see it, then it's something that's possible to this small self. What I want to do is transform what I am and let the outcomes be a surreal byproduct of my freedom, right?
mm,
So if I'm like, this is the answer, getting this, that's an outcome. So even when I get it, that's so what? I already knew I could do it from the beginning. What I like to do is change what I am completely and go on a real adventure. Like, imagine if every movie you watched, you knew what the ending was first. It wouldn't be very fun. So life is kind of the same thing. You don't need to know the ending. You
mm,
you want to go on this adventure and get excited about the journey. And yeah, you can have some stuff like I'd like this thing, but even more, I'd like to know what I would have to become and what I would have to let go of in order for it to be normal for this thing to come into my life. Right. So I'm much more about changing me and letting the results chase me versus chasing a result while staying the smaller self.
mm. So something I know about you is that your a book that changed your life is Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. And my favorite quote of all time is in that book. And it's not like a very famous, like popular Tony Robbins quote. It's kind of like in like the middle of the paragraph. But I think this is really relevant to what we're talking about right now. And it's you could be winning, but feel like you're losing because the scorecard you're using to grade your life could be unfair. And I feel like that's the root of a lot of suffering I've noticed in my life is when my scorecard was just really unfair and anything less than that those high standards I put on myself is like a failure. And it's and that
Yeah.
was that quote was a turning point for me because it was like, wait a second, like maybe the issue isn't you, maybe it's the unrealistic expectations you're putting on yourself. And I
Yeah.
was like 20 when I read that quote, and so it's like I kind of like told myself, I was like, you're 20, how perfect do you expect to be, right?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. And even though having high expectations in one realm and one consciousness can be good, every expectation implies I'm in lack now.
Hmm,
Right. So every time I'm like, if you do this, then you'll be something, what I'm implying is I'm not something. So how can I get to something if I keep forcing on myself that I'm not something? Like every time I'm saying I'll be worthy if I have this, I'm screaming unconsciously that I'm not now. And that character would have to die. And if it dies, I might not chase the thing though. Right.
hmm,
So the ego goes, I need to have lack in order to get a solution, because if I start with I'm whole, people on the unconscious realm get really scared. If you're whole right now, then you'll never do anything. You'll never chase anything. And if you go up in awareness, you'll start to realize if I'm whole now, more can be done through me that doesn't require my force and effort. So expectations, one quote of mine that was really big in the past was, nobody has ever broken your heart, but they broke your expectations. And by breaking your expectations, they got you closer to your heart.
hmm,
So I really think that sometimes expectations can be something that can push you, but there's a higher frequency where expectations can get in the way of what's trying to happen through you. So here's a good example. When I was in my 20s, I was a very successful Comedy Central stand-up comedian. And if I had an expectation of what I would be 20 years later now, I would be doing stadiums as a stand-up comedian.
Mm,
And instead, I listened to the now, and it at one point told me something that would be more fulfilling to me is trying to birth, and it actually asked me to let go of stand-up comedy. So, with 20 years experience as a headlining comedian, I let go of it and had no idea for a year what would birth through. But I found myself even higher of a frequency than the dream career that I created as a child and learning more and more about me. So if I kept my expectations, I would have done less now. And even if I had done stadiums as a comic, I don't know. I might have been a bitter guy. I wouldn't be in the relationship I'm in now. I wouldn't have my daughter. I don't know what I would have been. And maybe it would have been
mhm.
amazing. Maybe it would have been huge. But dude, we get emails from people that their lives changed and, they did it and everything, but there's a new fulfillment that I had no idea was on the other side of letting go of those expectations. So I found that in letting go of egoic expectations, God has higher for me than I could see. All my job is to let go of what's in the way of that and receive what's trying to come through, follow the callings and just trust.
Yeah, and it's sad. I bet there's so many people out there that they set that expectation for themselves at a young age and they just kept hammering at it even though it wasn't meant for them. And
Mhm.
especially when stuff like you spend 7 years getting a degree and like like how can you switch? You spend $100,000 in student loans and you're kind of stuck in that position. So like
Yeah.
it's sad to think of how many lives were so much worse by people like coming up with this expectation, just hammering at it over and over again
Yeah.
and they have a miserable life.
It's weird because I think the factor truly is your level of awareness, because there are
Mm,
people that did stay in that motivational world and have achieved insanely from expectations. And then there's people who just can't unsee what's true, that kind of have a teeny voice in them that go, is that the answer to my life to get there? And that's a crack where higher is trying to happen, right? So something better is trying to happen for the people that resonate with this content or are going in. And it's interesting because there are so many different levels of self-help. They're all on the same shelf. It's weird that Eckhart Tolle and Tony Robbins could be in the same place at Barnes and Noble, right?
mm,
Someone that's about letting go versus someone that's about making it happen. They're completely opposing energies. And it's like filing classical music in the same shelf with heavy metal. It's like, yeah, music is music, but these are different planets and they bring different feelings and different results. So the number one factor is your level of awareness. Number one factor is where are you and you honoring what the truest thing is that you know in this moment. Because I can feel if I'm like, okay, I'm going to put an expectation down and create a plan and force myself to make it happen. I actually feel a dip in my vibration when I think of that, right? I can actually feel a heaviness to that in a job and no room for God to come in with better things. And so I can feel force in a plan that doesn't make room for changes that'll happen. If I have 100-day plan, what happens if new information comes in? What happens if you didn't know this? Like, how can we know what a plan in a year is going to be other than, you know what I mean? When we don't know what's coming on the way, we don't even know what the world will do. Like, what if you have a
mm,
huge plan for something in March, but there's a civil war between now and then? Like, what if
mhm.
everyone that planned something in 2019 for 2021 might not have been planning on the 2020 stuff, right? So it's funny when you think you know what you're going to do, but you're not bringing in your own insights, your own, the world's insights, there might be a whole new calling that comes in. So the factor for me with everything I do is I ask myself, does it expand me or does it contract me?
Mm,
So I'm in an amazing relationship right now, but I find that being in it moves me closer to my heart. This interview we're doing is my career. It's part of what I do for a living, and it's expanding me to do it, right? I'm hearing this content and I'm changing and taking this advice as I'm giving it, which
mm,
also brings up the question, how could I be hearing what I'm saying? Like there's two of me. There's a me that's giving the advice and a me that's learning from what I'm saying, right? So this is really profound because you start to realize there's two yous. There's the
mm,
one that's guided, and then there's the one that hears it and then changes, right? So as we go up in vibration, you start to realize there's a whole world I didn't know about that can really make this a joyful, magical, expansive journey if I follow what's here and don't get so locked in a circumstance as the answer versus my vibration is.
Mm. Yeah, I noticed that with this podcast a lot too. Is like sometimes I say something and I'm like, I've never thought about that before. Like as I'm saying it, like it's like I'm like learning. Like, it's like the same thing that
Yeah.
you just said. What's the role of money in all of this? Because I feel like a lot of people make that their god, right? They make that's like the biggest marker of success or you being a worthy person, like in our society. And you also your book in 2019 was called "The Illusion of Money: Why Chasing Money is Stopping You from Receiving It."
Yes.
How is chasing money getting in the way of us actually getting money?
Well, it's really weird because every dollar that you've ever made in your life came from you, right? So everything you've ever done came from you. So isn't it weird we get excited about it versus us? In other words, if you have an intuitive idea that comes from some space in this moment, and then that is executed and brings in money, that means you bring in money. Money doesn't bring in you. So it's weird because we take this thing and look at it as a finite thing and say, this thing, money, is my God. But you made it. So you got to get
Mm,
excited about the infinite flow of what you are more than money. An example I use in the book, The Illusion of Money, is imagine if like you and I were in the woods and we were hiking, and let's say I round a corner and you don't see where I go, and I find a waterfall. It's just an unlimited waterfall and it's clean water that we can drink, right? Wouldn't it be weird if I got a cup, filled the cup with water from the waterfall, ran over to you and said, dude, look, a cup of water, but I don't tell you
mm,
about the infinite source. If we only had the cup of water, you would start thinking in lack. You would see the cup of water and you would be like, is there enough to pay my water bills? Can I donate any? No, because there's only this a little amount. Is that like you would be thinking from the frequency of small amount. And so people that are obsessed with money are actually saying money is a finite thing and it's actually an infinite thing and you're an infinite thing. And so if you stop thinking of it as a limited thing that is finally the answer to your life, you start to realize abundance isn't money, it's me. In fact, even in the last 4 years, that's really been the case because in the
mm,
last 4 years, um, they've been printing money. Like if I get someone's autograph and then that person signs every person's autograph, it's not worth very much. So if they're printing more and more and more money, it's not worth as much. But there's only one you, and there's only your connection to God, right? And Bob Proctor used to say, your power is based in how replaceable you are, and your value is based on how replaceable you are. And if you start tapping into the God version of you, you're not replaceable. And that's worth billions of dollars. But if you think you're not worth that much and you're trying to be someone else and you're just easily kind of selling out and not doing much, and the second you're gone, anyone can replace you, you're not worth anything, right?
mm.
So, it doesn't mean that any job isn't still valuable and I still support anyone in any job, but finding the unique version of you taps you into the infinite abundance of what you are. And then you start to realize there's only one of me. There's major value to what I'm doing. I only have 24 hours in a day, and what I'm offering the world is extremely valuable. I should charge more for what I do because I don't have that much time. So there's a cliche that we move as if our time is infinite and our money isn't, and it's backwards. Your time is
Mm.
limited. So you tap into your uniqueness and start to discover it and move up in your vibration. You're not replaceable now. Now we got to work with you. If Michael Jackson was doing a concert and announced he's not going to do it, so here's someone else, that's going to be a pissed off audience, right? So there's only one of him. But if it's a job that doesn't require your soul, you can bring in anyone to do it, right? So
Yeah.
finding your uniqueness and getting that your value is worth more than money is an incredible way to tap into abundance. You will start to see yourself as abundance, and money will have to chase that.
Do you think that we'll get to that point as a society where we have that belief? Because right now that's not the case. Right now it's very much like how much money you have is like your value to the world.
Yeah,
Do you
I
think
don't
we'll
know.
ever get to a place?
Yeah, I don't know that everyone has that, but I do think that
Mm,
it's a pretty high thing. But
yeah.
here's why I think that will eventually be the case. If people think my value is how much money I have, what life has to do as we go up in vibration is remove money from people, meaning like people are losing money a lot right now. People are losing their money. They don't know why. Well, that's partly because you have a belief that your value is based on how much money you have. So God has to take it from you so you can see that you're enough, even if you don't have it,
Mm,
and tap into some real powers that you didn't know. So it's kind of like if Clark Kent never knew he was Superman, but thought he was his money. And then God takes all the money from Clark Kent and he's like, what do I do? Oh my God, he can keep trying to get the money or finally go inward and discover he can fly. And trust me, that might be worth more money than Clark Kent could have ever made.
mm, yeah. You speak a lot about letting go of your old identity. How does someone where does that process start? If someone just doesn't like who they are and someone like they don't like their life or where their life is heading, what is the first step to starting that transformation?
The first step to start the transformation is get wide open to understanding that every limitation, every self-hate, every darkness, every guilt, every regret is based on a pattern and is not you. And undo calling it I. You know, when you say, I keep worrying, I'm a procrastinator, I don't like myself. Nope, you're now. And the
Mm,
pattern doesn't. So there's a lot of times that people fight for the limitation because they think they're identified with that because that's what the conditioning was from their parents' egos. So if you start to understand that that's not me that doesn't like myself, that's not me that's scared it's a failure, that's not me that failed, whatever, that's a pattern. And that you are the now, you start to move to being an unconditional loving space for the pattern. And so when the pattern finally sees that it's seen, it dissolves. So take in the idea that every limitation, you got to get really humble. You got to undo yourself from distractions. It's very hard to hear these truths that need to be heard if you're constantly scrolling, if you're comparing yourself to other people, if you're overeating, if you're drinking all the time. These things are distracting you from the real truth coming to light inside of you. So we got to let go of the things that kind of keep the old story alive and go through a couple weeks of pain of the old story that wants the alcohol or the partying or the story or the whatever, the guilt or the everything, and be willing to sit through some pain and fear, and then it transcends fully and you'll find a very freer version of you.
mm,
So if you want to find the truth of what you are, we let go. First of all, my way is to let go of the things that let go of the actual physical things that keep the patterns in. So if you're hooked on watching TV all day, maybe you in your childhood bonded with your parents by watching TV. So if you finally turn the TV off or unplug it or donate it or whatever, you're going to have a while of feeling actual withdrawals because the pattern goes, I'm not watching TV, so I'm not loved anymore. Well, just you're just talking about your childhood. And that pattern could come to light. And if you don't watch TV, you connect to source enough to actually be here and listen, you'll become the space to hear the thing that's scared, become a space of love for it. It gets heard and it leaves. And then you lose the external addiction and you move up in vibration. Right.
mm,
So it's for me, the process is let go of the external that doesn't expand me. Let go of anything that feels like it's taking me down or contracting me, because only an addicted energy in me would keep it. Then feel the pain panic that needs it and
mm,
watch it go through its crap for a couple days, like someone not drinking. But then find the deep trauma that ran that character after that. Oh, there's an inevitable trauma. I'm not loved. I'm not enough, whatever. And then you become a now that's such a portal that's so big and so loving that that wounded child can be seen and go too. So you can move up in frequency. And I do believe that people are being forced to do that right now because there's now, for a lot of people, nothing you can do on the external to heal what's inside, right? So chasing a thing and achieving something isn't doing it for a lot of people and also is not working. It's not, you're not, the amount of times someone I know, meaning like a client or something, declares that they got the plan, they're going to market it this way. They get to the next day and are like, never mind, because because the declaration isn't your God, it's the now. And so all of those old constructs can fall apart if you stop chasing the things that are not a 10 in your soul. So if you go, it's like a 6 to keep this, let it go because a small you is staying alive, keeping a hold on it. So if you allow it to collapse, it can fall out. And then it's always replaced by more magic, more light, more frequency, more amazing, and then more can happen for you to match the frequency you just created.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like where most people get stuck is in that you talked about the addiction, then you like some person says like, okay, I'm finally done with this. I'm done. And then they stop it and then they feel the discomfort and then that's when they just go back to it because they can't take it anymore. How do
Yeah.
we just sit through that discomfort? How do we just sit there and let it pass until we actually break that addiction, whatever that addiction might be?
There's a quote I heard, and I wish I knew who it was, but it was a woman that was a major runner and won a ton of Olympics. And I think I heard Tom Bilyeu talk about it on Impact Theory, but like a woman that was a major gold medalist said, the only factor in me that is winning all this is I'm willing to tolerate more pain than other people are.
Hmm.
Right. So a great example would be someone fasting, right? Like if someone's fasting for a few days, they might feel some pain because it's like they think they want the food, but it's turning out the emotions are there. Very often when I fast, I notice I'm not necessarily hungry, but the emotions are like, am I loved because I'm not eating? Right? And all kinds of emotional stuff starts to come to light. If I can sit long enough with it and sometimes really sit in a place where I just feel doomed and dark and crappy, I'll keep going and it'll break off in tears and all of a sudden I'm on the other side, right? And I've been lucky because I've been to a lot of different major meditation retreats, 10-day retreats. I was at 4 years ago, I was at a darkness retreat and I just sat in pure darkness for 10 days in Ashland, Oregon, and had no phone, no ability to see light. And, sat through every 15 minutes, dark pain would come out, but then become tears. And when I got out, this was ironic. My company had more results in the time I was in there doing
Hmm.
nothing than when I was in there trying to make things happen. When I came out, I had more sales than I had ever seen. And I was like, all I did was get out of the way, right? But I was also feeling through tons of pain and tons of, I miss my mom who had died and I don't like myself right now, or I feel like I'm not enough or whatever. And I would get all these insights. And by day 7, I felt like I could see through the walls. I was having lucid dreams and felt like my dead mom came in and held me. I mean, I had some miraculous, surreal things as these traumas kept clearing out. So I have an insight that I think that a lot of people feel pain because they do not get what's on the other side. And if you had the ghost of Christmas future come in and show you what's on the other side, you'd sit through that pain, right? You'd be like, this is worth it because it's miraculous on the other side. So I think a reason people stop is they just feel the pain, but don't get there's an outcome that's going to blow your mind, maybe 10 minutes away, maybe 20 minutes away. So some people are like, you know what, I've gone far enough. And then the justification pattern comes in. I think I'll eat, or I think I'll give up this, or I'll go back to addictions. But when you really just sit and let these things fall apart, you got to realize you're also inviting more light in every day. Every minute I'm not picking up something or caught in something, more light comes in and more magic comes in and it starts healing the old energies. So yeah, I don't know which I forget what your question was, but I think that might help.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there ever a time because the thing about that darkness retreat is that there's no numbing. There's nothing you can do to numb it. Was there a
Right.
time in your life where you tend to numb when like every time those like hard feelings came up, you just numbed it with something?
Yes. I mean, I had a very achiever-based life
Hmm.
from 2004 to 2000. It's interesting. I would say 2004 to 2010, I was full on motivation, right? 2010 to 2020 was more vibration-based stuff, right? So
Hmm.
higher versus lower. But it was working so magically that I got to have a lot of vices in my life. I got a lot of attention. I got a lot of love. I made a lot of money. I was very successful. I had people that would stop me at places and tell me how their life changed. I got New York Times best. I got a lot of, and the analogy I use is kid in a candy store, right? Like
Mm.
there was just so many things coming my way that was magical. So I didn't have to go any deeper for a while. And then I feel like 2020 for all of us was a big clearing of whatever was going on, and then a major pattern break where it made you go inward and, have to stay in your house and hear things differently and feel inward as you don't know what to do. And I think it was the beginning of a combination of a fall apart and a mass awakening of people meditating, going to higher frequencies, and creating a base where truth could come out everywhere. And so I also really like what happened in that way, right? So, yes, I had a lot of things coming into my life, which caused me to not have to go deeper because I could just numb myself with anything, attention, money, success, people loving it from that. And so, yeah, I didn't have to go deeper, right?
Yeah.
And and I think that the fall apart in 2020 for all of us was the beginning of the force of deeper. And so if
Mm.
people feel they're falling apart right now, one thing I want to offer them that I think is really exciting is an analogy that comes from not too long ago. My daughter jumped on my bed. I was just laying down having a conversation with my fiance, and my daughter came and jumped on the bed, and all this dust kicked up, right? And there's only one place where you could see the dust because there was like a crack in the window where light was coming in, right? This was a big deal metaphor in my life because where the light was, you could see the dust, but the dust was everywhere, but you could
Mm.
only see it where there's light. So if people feel a lot of crap is being shown in their body or life is getting hard for them and they don't know what to do, the only reason you can see that is because you've accessed more light. So the light can see the darkness much better because that dust was everywhere, but you could only see it where there was light. So if people feel they're getting a lot of anxiety or darkness or feeling a lot of alone or whatever, the only reason you're feeling that is because you've accessed more light. And that more light is good news. It just needs to clear out what isn't true anymore.
Mm. Yeah, something similar to this is I've heard you say that being lost is in a way creating space for you to pick up something amazing. So
Yeah.
where does that feeling of being lost come from? Because I feel like there are so many people who might have that feeling of being lost. Not they don't
Yeah.
know what they want to do. They don't know who they are. And they that can be very overwhelming. It can make you like almost like stuck and it can make you not know which action to take.
Yeah. Well, here's the good news is that the reason that we feel lost is because, believe it or not, we lived in a way that felt amazing, but isn't the truth. And the way that we used to
Mm.
live was I have to always know what the future is, right? I have to always know that I have the locked relationship, that I have the career forever, that I know that I have enough in the bank, right? So, what we've done before this time is normalized a constant looking in the future that always knew that everything was okay because you're looking in the future. And then what has happened is the collapse of your ability to see the future. But the way you were seeing it still wasn't the truth. I mean, there's people that thought they were married forever and then the relationship fell apart. There's people that thought they had the ultimate job and the company went out of business, right? So the idea of certainty that you have is also not true. So what's happening in this time is your constant addicted glimpse into the future is being pulled from you. And you're not lost, you're here. And so lost is like, I don't know what my future exactly looks like, but that doesn't mean you're lost. That means you're finally free. And then you can go up and
Mm.
actually learn true surrender, true God, not just surrender like I surrendered, did I make even more money? Not just I surrendered, did my partner guarantee me forever? Like I surrender, I don't know what the results are. I just trust they're right. That's freedom. So if you could allow the lost to be here and listen, and what you said was when they're lost, they don't know what action to take. I would offer if you're lost, don't take any action. Listen
Mm,
internally. Don't do anything right now because your old pattern might be doing it and it's trying to die. So if your old pattern creates a solution and then the pattern dies, the solution will collapse anyway. So when you don't know what to do, as Maya Angelou said, if you don't know what to do, do nothing. I would say stop the addictions and listen because something is trying to come out of you that no longer serves you. And then life's going to be even better after that happens.
mm. What's the measurement of a good life? So we talked about the things that aren't a measurement of a good life: success, money, material things. Um, Thinking that once you get a relationship, then you'll finally be happy. So what to you, what's a measurement of a good life?
Yeah, well, I would say, and that's sure. I hope people don't hear that to mean those things aren't great if they're
Mm,
expansive and awesome. Because I'm
yeah.
absolutely for bringing in abundance. I'm absolutely
Mhm,
for having an amazing relationship. So those things aren't like bad guys. But what I like to do is have a hierarchy where my connection to my soul is first. And I
mm,
go, does the thing I bring into my life help me get even closer to my soul? Right. So I want to make sure that's there. So for me, a great life for me is am I choosing to expand, right? But I want to bring up on an even deeper level, no matter what happens is a good life. This is a weird thing and can
mm,
be controversial because people will be like, well, what if you're a whatever? And I'm not saying choose to hurt people. Obviously, do stuff that expands your soul. But I just have gotten to a place where I'm not arguing with what is as much, where I'm just like, that was supposed to happen. Because nothing is more stressful than arguing with what is. So
mm.
if I have something fall apart, there's one level where it hurts because it's supposed to heal this thing. But if I'm like, no, that's not supposed to happen, then I'm just in a bizarre argument with life.
That you're
And
not going to win.
that you're
Yeah.
never going to win because it's a fact that it happened, right? So for me, ways to feel better and make a life feel very valuable are to learn those tools and go up vibrationally, right? And I think that if someone watches a podcast like this far, they're too aware that it almost can't not go up. It
Mm,
has to ascend. Like if you're this aware, you have to ascend because when you go off course, when you pick up an addiction that's in the way of your ascension, it takes seconds now. Have you ever noticed that you take your one sip of alcohol and you're like, never mind. Or,
mhm,
you'll start scrolling and like, what am I doing? I don't want to do this. Like it doesn't work now. Our awareness is too high. So we are letting go of our addictions quicker and quicker and quicker. I feel like in the past, people would just stay that for life. And there are some people that still do. But I feel like it's just going to be more and more painful to keep
mm,
that going. And you'll have to exponentially keep more addictions going because there are some people that dust is showing and they're trying to not look at it. So that dust coming in through the light is showing and they're like, I don't show me. I don't want to see it. What's addictive and okay, I'll look at this and I'll stay. And that's trying to stay third density, right? Where you're trying to stay addicted to things because you don't want to look at the truth of what hurts inside, which would take you to a higher frequency. So if you're watching this, have the courage to sit through some of the pain. It's worth those few days for a free you on the other side.
mm,
And just get present and here and open to, you're gonna be shocked at the abundance and love and magic and expansion and freedom that comes in when these wounds are healed and how much not only happens for you, but I believe the world mirrors my frequency too. So I
mm,
find that when I let go of something, it suddenly changes and becomes magical too. I've had days where I've let go of stuff and everyone around me is suddenly crying that day too. And I start to realize, am I shifting this? Like, I'll let
mm,
go of an addiction to a political outcome and all of a sudden watch as it changes. I mean, like, it's crazy how much this stuff moves into the ethers of synchronicity and magic when you undo your small self that's trying to control everything. And I believe that's at the essence of what's happening. God is trying to remove egoic control from the planet and move us into surrender. That's what's trying to happen in this time. And all the egoic ways that we used to control and achieve things aren't working anymore. So we're left having to go inward. So that's why I think quite a bit's going to shift as time goes on.
I hope so. What's the biggest misconception that young people have about being an adult?
What's the biggest misconception? That's a really interesting question that young people have on being an adult. Well, one thing I think that's really interesting is how we've all trained ourselves that the other way is better. I mean, here's a kid
Mm,
saying, every parent is saying, or adult, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? So forget now you playing at 7. Let's figure out your career and let's decide what you want to be. And let's fantasize about being an adult. And then, what's funny is when we're adults, we start to go, I miss when I was a child. I
mm,
miss how free I was. I miss how, and that's because as a child, you actually weren't addicted to outcomes and you're really exploring. And Vivi's like a little scientist. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and we went to a juice place the other day and she got a purple drink and a black drink. And she drank them both down to half and then started pouring them into each other. And she said the purple drink was actually pink, and she's pouring the black into there and making it purple, and then pouring that back into the black and lightening the black, and was just so excited about it. And if I was like a control freak parent, I'd be like, stop making a mess and whatever. But really explore, kiddo. Like, really
mm,
see what happens when you drop the egg or when you make a mess or when you do that. Because she's not sitting here going, I have to pay the rent. I have to, she's actually exploring. And that to me tells me that's our true nature. And when you start to go, I want to explore things inside of me and outside of me that I've never seen before, you're going back to the childhood aspect. But I would say, kids think a lot. It's better when they're grown-ups, Vivi
mm,
already can't wait to drive. My daughter's asking about,
mm.
what happens when you get to drive. And I'll tell her so she feels excited, but at the same time, I'm letting her know, enjoy this, enjoy this so much because you're perfect at 7. And I
Mm.
think even, it's funny, the expectation question from earlier is always us wishing we were something farther along. And I find that to kind of be abusive. Wouldn't it be weird if my 7-year-old daughter, I'm sitting here going, you need to be 20 now. You need to be farther along. And that carries to everything. When someone has an insight and they say, why didn't I know this earlier? Because you were supposed to know it now. Stop wishing you grew faster than you needed to, so that's trying to happen, our speeding it up and getting somewhere else, and our real joy in the now versus in an outcome that now everybody loves me because I got that outcome. You don't want to be that. You want to be what you are and let life mirror it.
Yeah, and the ironic part about that is that once you do get to that level, you miss the old days, right? And it's like it's one of those things where like you're just some people are just never satisfied.
Well, that's the conditioning taught to us.
Mm,
That's when something happens, I'll be happy. That's the illness. That's the highest addiction we have.
mm,
We think our addiction is to alcohol or drugs. No, your addiction is to when something happens, I'll be happy. And trust me, as someone who got things I wanted, then I was more unhappy when I got it. And I don't know if it was Eckhart Tolle who said there's two ways to be unhappy: not get what you want or get what you want.
mm.
Right. And so the happiness truly and fulfillment is not based on I have 12 Porsches in the garage. It's based on I'm now. Right. And so this was taught to us. There was a thing that felt like it was freeing to say, you are this thing that you do. You got to get the ultimate job and whatever. And then people did it and starting to go, this isn't it. I'm just
Mm.
tired and have a bunch of things, but I'm still eventually just left with me. And none of these things come with me when I die anyway. So who cares? There's just some things now.
Yeah.
And Wayne Dyer said, if you think you are what you have, you still can have a bunch, but don't think what you are is what you have. Because if that goes away, then you go away too,
Mm.
right? So find what you are and then see what happens after that.
So my last question is, if you had a minute with your younger self, what would you tell him?
Nothing. I would let him unfold.
I've
You
heard
know,
that before, yeah.
yeah, because I wouldn't change one thing that's ever happened in my life. And if I could give myself any advice, that would change the entire course.
Mm.
And I might have gotten advice that would have stopped me from learning advice, like meaning like learning
Yeah,
through
yeah.
experiences. Because no matter how much advice you get, there's nothing more qualifying to change you than experiencing it. right? So if, oh, that would be the advice, but I wouldn't tell me anything. I don't want to get in there because I already know that if one thing was different, I wouldn't have my daughter. If one little thing was different, I mean, like if I turn my head differently,
Hmm.
I know everything's different. Check this out, here's actual proof of it. If we end this interview 1 minute later than planned, literally you have a whole different planet. And here's why. Let's give an example. Let's say you and I end this interview a minute later, and I go out and you and I go out and do stuff. And let's say I run through a yellow light that I would have sat at a red, which makes like a car behind me suddenly have to stop that would have gone through, right? Now, this guy, let's say behind me, might go into the store a minute later than he would have before. And now he either meets the love of his life because he went in there a minute later,
Hmm.
or doesn't meet them because he went in. And do you get what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
everything's suddenly different. Or he bumps into someone and talks to them for 20 minutes and now is totally in a different reality. Well, if you meet the love of your life or you wouldn't have had you got there earlier, now different children are being born. So our egoic problem is we look from a small lens and we don't see a bigger picture is happening with everything happening. So when you're sitting here sad about your circumstance, you don't realize a million other things and children are being born based on your circumstance. So there's a whole different reality forming, right? So the big realization is that everything's perfect every way. And your
Hmm.
only reason for suffering is you think it's happening to a small you that goes, this person dumped me, so I'm all alone. Well, when they dumped you, now someone else is doing something differently because every energy is different. So literally, me going meh just created totally a whole new reality.
Wow.
Just
Wow.
right. So there's
Yeah. Yeah.
right now different children everywhere. So
Yeah.
this is really weird because you start to realize we never ever want to aim for anything bad. But if there wasn't Hitler, you and I wouldn't exist probably,
Hmm.
right? Every bad thing also is like, so we don't know all the way on the highest level what the inevitable truth of good and bad is in the long run. We do know what we prefer when our job is to be as wonderful and amazing for humanity and not hurt people, but understand that we don't know the bigger picture of everything going on. So this is why it's really easy to let go of fear, guilt, regret, and choose higher things, but stop holding on to a past mistake because you don't know how many other things form from that mistake and how much it affects all of the universe. So we surrender our past completely and make room for a higher us and a better us and undue attachment to an outcome because our outcome is nothing compared to what's going on the planet based on every move we make.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So I don't do an outro. I kind of just cut it there. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Oh, can I mention a thing I have out? Is that okay?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Of
Yeah.
course. Yep.
Yeah, I just want to mention Um, we did an event that is a 9 hour course that came from a full 2 day course. And we decided to take this event and make it $20. Because again, I'm not attached to an outcome. And I've always had people
Hmm.
saying, dude, your product should be $1,000, whatever. It's $20. And it's awesome. And it's called The Angel You Forgot About. And the reason it's called that is because whenever we're going through dark things, we often forget there's always an angel that you can go to, meaning like a person that's a good space holder, going to God, going to whatever yours is, and going to a higher frequency, talking to a tree. I say this because at one point in my life, I was suicidal. I almost jumped off of overpass. And my teammate, Mary, called me and listened to me enough that it talked me out of it. And I realized that there's always an angel that you can grab onto that will take you higher. So, one of the things people make as a mistake is they look at their crappy circumstance and they kind of get in the mud with it and dark and try to change the circumstance. But if you would instead go inward and be like, God, help me heal this, help me let go of this, help me find a higher me with this, is different. So, people can get this entire 2 day thing for $20 at kylecease.com/angel. And we also have a membership site where I do live calls and answer people's questions and shift them on the show. That's our Absolutely Everything Pass. They can get it on kylecease.com/everything, and it's literally $39 a month. And the biggest comment we have is it's so expensive for people to not have it because they keep spending more money on addictive things. And instead of going up in vibration, they're going to higher levels of health, higher levels of joy, less addiction. So they're spending thousands of less dollars as they go up in vibration and accessing higher level ideas that bring in more money. So it's really expensive not to get these things. So grab the angel you forgot about. And the slogan for that is stop holding up the world and start being held. And then the slogan for Absolutely Everything Pass, I don't have one, but if I did, it'd be really cool. So check out the Absolutely Everything Pass or the angel you forgot about and change your life.